So now that we've built a rig for our arm, let's talk about Winslow here, because he's a much more complicated rig, right? So unlike our arm rig, Winslow is not actually broken up into pieces. He is all one contiguous piece, with the exception of some eyelids and an eyeball here. And so I would like to use this video to just talk about Winslow's rig and what we're actually seeing here. So let's sort of isolate those things. I'll select my clavicle, I'll select my Winslow group. We'll isolate that just so we can kind of see these side by side, and in case I need to talk about this, right? So Winslow has all of these controls around him. And as you've probably already seen, these aren't rendering. Like when I render Winslow, I don't see all of these boxes around him. Right? So think of this as a puppet. Right? Winslow's body is one piece, but I want his head to be able to rotate separate from his chest and his neck, assuming we can sort of define those body parts on this model. These little ear flaps that hang out here, his antennae. Right? All of those things I want to kind of have their own ability to be manipulated. And that's what these controls are for. So if I were to select this, you'll see the pivot point for that is down here. I can hit E, and I can rotate Winslow's head with that control. So we have a head control, and what I'd like to do is just sort of take you through this rig and show you what each of them do. So we have this head control, and we have these neck controls, and we have these little ear controls, and all of those are mainly going to work off of rotation. That I rotate those to put those where I want them. Now, I technically can translate this, but it doesn't always give me the result that I would want. Maybe I just want to use a little bit to stretch it. So maybe he's falling, and I want it to make it look like his ears are really dragging behind. Maybe I can do something like that. But you're going to see that some of these blue controls, if I translate them too far, it's going to start to break the model just a little bit. Right? And that's what I want you to think of these as. These are ways in which we can manipulate this model to get it into the poses that we want it to get into. Right? We have a neck control that'll also control a little bit of that. And then the head on top of that. And maybe I do want to translate the head just a touch, right? And these are all these blue controls are usually going to be rotation oriented, right? We also have this hierarchy of controls for the antenna, right? And if I were to grab all three of those together and bend them, you'll see that I can get them into a pretty interesting position. Get these very kind of appealing and curvy poses, right? That are hopefully going to feel kind of alien. Now, I'll point out a couple of other things that are on this rig that are in that blue color. Is also these controls that are kind of hard to see. They're kind of hidden behind his eyes just a little bit. And if I select both of those, these are his eyelids. And so I can change what his eyelids are doing. Actually, if I set both of these values to 0, it'll actually close his eye. And so this is how we can make him blink. Or if I really wanted him to blink, maybe be a little bit more like that. I can also open that back up, and it has the ability to sort of lean one side or the other if I needed it to. So that's what those are for, so we can get some eye animation on here. We have two ways of making Winslow's eyes look around. And the first is this yellow control here. It's a little cross mark. If I take that and translate it, this is something that Winslow will look at. Right? So I can lock this onto something over here, and no matter what he does with his head, he will always stay looking over there in that direction. Well, I'm sorry. It makes more sense if we don't have this set to follow. I think, there we go. So no matter where he looks, his eye will stay looking in that direction. Right? So again, if you want his eye to always follow that and this to stay locked, we just set the follow control on this to 0. And it's worth mentioning that a lot of these controls may have extra attributes in the channel box. So for example, I get my translates and rotates here, but I also have this control called global. And what global does right now, if I were to rotate Winslow's neck, you'll see the head goes with it, right? But if I select the head and set global to 10 and rotate his neck, now the head kind of stays in one place, right? It doesn't stay in one place. It stays in the same orientation, right? And so there's a lot of extra controls that you're going to find on some of these things, particularly if you start selecting some of these red controls. So this top red control, you'll see a whole bunch of extra things in here. And we'll talk about some of those here in a second. But let's talk about this entire red system for Winslow's spine. So this is an IK system. And what that means is these two boxes on the end can be locked in place. And then this middle control is just used for sort of guiding the shape. So let's say I wanted to make Winslow sort of squash before he jumps. Translate him down, squashes, right? And then I want him to stretch, I'll pull him back up, right? And so I'm able to move this part to get a lot of stuff happening in his upper body, and the bottom control stays in place, right? Well, vice versa, if I grab this bottom control and move it, the top control will stay in place as well. Right? And so I can do stuff like this. And then I use this middle control to sort of change the way of this works, right? Maybe I want to work a little bit more like this. And then I want to rotate his head a little bit more like this. Yeah. And so I have sort of this complete ability to pose Winslow in a pretty dramatically different pose than what he was in before, right? I'm going to go ahead and reset that. In fact, I should be able to grab everything here, I guess including that, and reset my translates and rotates and get my character back to his default pose, right? So it moved him over. So we'll talk about this big blue control here. Actually, there's a blue control and there's a green control. And let's just look at how those work a little bit. If I move the blue control, it moves everything. Right? But just like we talked about earlier, moving the clavicle here doesn't mean I'm setting keyframes on everything. Think of this as like Winslow's container, right? This is how I can move him to a different, like if I want the animation to start with him over here, right? That's how I get him in that place for the animation to start. When I start moving Winslow around, though, if I want this to stay locked in place, right? Let's say I hit S to set a keyframe and lock that in place. Well, this is a parent of that red box. And so if I move this, that red box is not going to stay locked in place, right? And in fact, if I move this green arrow here as well, the same thing. The red box does not stay locked in place. So only way I can make that red box stay locked in place is if I am animating on it. Right? And so if I grab both of these and move it, Winslow's entire body moves as well. And so think of this as how we're going to place him. But when I animate him, I'm mainly going to make him jump from here to over here. I'm going to have those keyframes on those two boxes there. Right? And the reason for that is because once he's there, if this were moving, he wouldn't stay locked in place. Right? So really, I usually place this at the beginning of the animation, and then I don't really mess with it anymore after that. This can be used to move his whole body, and sometimes people like to use that for that purpose. But it still will, if you need his bottom of his body to stay stuck to the floor, you're going to want to move it with these controls. Right? because then they will sort of act as the main highest level parent, right? So let's go ahead and move this back. I'll show you when I'm animating with Winslow a little bit later what I mean by some of that. Now, last thing I want to talk about is in this spine that we had here. Oh, I should mention one more thing. Because we zeroed out all of Winslow's controls, apparently except his eye aim. His eye aim is over here. Right? I can zero that out as well. I will mention one more thing on his eye, which is you'll notice there's this little controller here. And what that'll let you do is, say we have Winslow looking way over here at a thing, right? This will allow you to have a little bit of additional animation on that eye, right? Because our eyes will do these like little like darts around, right? And so when I'm moving this, it's not moving this. It's like in addition to that. Right? And that's a pretty, basically, this is for two different mindsets about how you want to animate the eye. Some people like to animate the eye by rotating it toward what it's looking at. Some people like to have this aim control so they can point at what it's looking at. And both have their perks. Both have their reasons for wanting to use those. Okay, so I'm going to show you one more thing on this rig, which is this spine that I was talking about earlier. We call this an IK spine, and its IK is inverse kinematics, and we'll learn more about that later. But usually IK means you're animating in translations, whereas FK means you're animating in rotation, and FK stands for forward kinematics. So it's inverse kinematics and forward kinematics, and we'll learn a little bit more about IK in Project 3. So I would encourage you to probably use this rig for Winslow's animations. However, I will point out that there's this little bitty control here that gives you the option to switch to a completely different spine. And this one is fully FK, which means it's fully rotation driven. And that's good too. And in a lot of cases, I work pretty heavily in FK with a lot of different rigs. The problem with it is it's not going to let you translate and get these like stretchy poses quite as easily. You can get some interesting stuff, but it's not really getting you nearly the same level of posing. You'll also say that it works a little different with the way the hips work, right? That's a rotation thing. So what I would point out is that these are two different options that we can switch between to control the spine. And so right now we're in FK mode. Let's say I put it in FK, I try this, I'm like, I don't like that. I can go back to IK mode, and now the IK system is controlling the spine. So it's two different options for how to animate Winslow's spine. So we will animate Winslow later, and there'll be some more details on how this rig works in regards to animation. But there's a lot of controls on this, right? And so the last thing I'll point out is how we would want to select all of Winslow's controls, right? Because as I mentioned before, just because I have it, selected doesn't necessarily, or just because it's highlighted doesn't necessarily mean I have it selected. So to make sure I have everything selected, I could just drag and select everything. But as I just showed you, one of the sets of controls for Winslow's spine are hidden. And actually, I still even missed his eye over here, right? So that allows me to select everything visible, but not everything, right? And so I would use this time to show you how selection sets work. So if I go over here to Winslow V1 sets, and I hit the plus, right? Think of these like bookmarks. And so these are bookmarks for previous selections that have been made. And this was created when the rig was created. So you'll notice that there are these control sets under here. And if I expand out those control sets, these are all of Winslow's controls. That's a lot of things. Some of them are hidden, and you can tell, like, I don't know if you can see that they're visibility or not. But if I click the top one and hold shift and select the bottom one, that's all of Winslow's controls. And again, some of those are hidden and we can't even see them, but now we have them all selected, right? And so if I wanted to make sure I was setting a keyframe on everything, this is how I would do it. I'll show you a shortcut on how we can select those more quickly later. So with that in mind, keep in mind, these are not duplicates of these objects. These are just bookmarks where we can quickly select them. With that in mind, we could make a selection set for all of our controls with our arm as well, right? And so I'm going to go here to Custom and sort of expand out my clavicle pieces here. And I'm just going to select them all, hold Shift to select everything. And I'm going to go to Create, Sets, Quick Select Set. And if I do that, a button is going to pop up here, and it's going to ask, what do you want to name this? And I'll call this Arm Select. Okay. And I can hit OK, but I can also hit Add to Shelf. And when I do that, I now have this button up here. Whenever I click that button, it will select all of those controls for me. And so that's going to make animating that a lot easier. The same with Winslow. I can actually do that with this selection set. And you'll see the selection set is down here at the bottom, Arm Select. So that's all of those things in there. And if I wanted to select them this way, I could right click and say Select Set Members. There we go. So I can show you how to quickly make a button for Winslow as well. If I open up my, down here in the very bottom right-hand corner, this is the script editor. And I'm going to go to Edit and then Clear All. And I'm going to open up Winslow's sets here, and I'm going to choose Main, and then scroll all the way down to Hip Swinger M. So those two lines of code there, those two lines of mill script, are the script that fires off whenever we need to select something, or all of Winslow's parts. So you can see it's a long script. So all this button is doing is it's running that script whenever I click it for the arm. Right? So I'm just going to make a button that does that with Winslow as well. So I'm going to highlight that, and I think it is, let's see, this button here, Save Script to Shelf, this fourth one over. And when I click that, I can name this Winslow and hit OK. And I'm going to choose Mel as the type of script. And so now I have two buttons up here, and one of those buttons selects all of the controls for Winslow, and the other one selects all of the controls for the arm. And that's going to be very handy when we start animating these things in the next few videos.